YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and this is one I'm pretty excited about. This is my Spyderco Stretch, and this is the Sprint Run in Agomi Super Blue. So this is a pretty cool blade, and I'll give you a little bit of information by way of introduction. The Stretch is quite an old Spyderco design, designed by Sal Glesser, and specifically designed for bushcraft type of stuff. Now, when I get to talking about this blade in particular, I'm going to kind of steer away from that because of the fact that the Agomi Super Blue is not a stainless. But you need to know that the knife shape and size and handle shape and all of that is very functional by design. And that's one of the things that generally you find with Spydercos. In fact, by Sal Glesser's own words, one time he was accused of designing ugly knives, and he said, we design knives around the edge and around the hand and not around the eye. And I thought, yep, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I don't think this knife is particularly ugly, although I know some people have said, I don't know what I think of the look of this knife. It probably is more exaggerated in the closed position. It sort of has that weird Spyderco-y look. But Spydercos have that, and I think I've said before in maybe the Para 2 video that if you look at a Spyderco and then if you laid 100 knives out on the table and said to someone, can you pick out the Spydercos, almost anyone could do it, even if they didn't know much about knives. They have a pretty distinctive look, and this is of course no exception, especially being a slightly older design. So that all out of the way, let's get into some of the other interesting things about this blade. The size and weight on this is essentially, okay, like by a 1/16 of an inch, it's off of 8 inches. So about 7 and 15/16. So you may as well say it's 8 inches overall. It's a 3.5 inch blade, and the handle is basically 4.5 inches. Just under, again, like a 1/16 of an inch under 4.5 inches. The width on this handle is 5/16. And the weight on this is just over 3 ounces. Now, I know a precise measurement would be nice, but here's what I've noticed. One, when you have different people weighing different knives, you get some variation. The variation may be in the knives themselves, in terms of just slight variation from the factory. The variation could be in the scales that people are using. And so this knife came in just over 3 inches on my scale, like 3.1. It's listed at 3.2 something on most retailers' websites, but you need to know just over 3 inches. That's going to just over 3 ounces. That should give you a pretty good idea of what you're dealing with. Very comfortable knife to carry, very light, very easy to use. The ergonomics are pretty good on this. And so let's get into, as I always do, the knife, starting with the blade and then kind of working my way down. So this blade is what really makes this knife stand out. This is a Sprint Run in Agomi Super Blue. Now the Agomi Super Blue, I'm going to see if I can let you see this. The Agomi Super Blue is only used in the edge. And then it's laminated with a 420 J1 stainless. Now that's because the Agomi Super Blue is not stainless. So to help with corrosion resistance, most of this knife is done in stainless steel. Just the edge where you want that cutting power and you want the particular properties of Agomi Super Blue is in that steel. Now, having kind of said that, what's so great about the Agomi Super Blue? Well, a number of things that I was able to find out by doing some research. One, this is a very hard steel that excels at edge retention, sort of as good as any high-end steel out there, or maybe even better. It comes in at a Rockwell hardness of 65, which is nuts, right? And the crazy thing about it is, for some reason, whatever the properties of the chemical or the molecular makeup of the steel, it doesn't chip or break very easily. That's why it's considered such a great blade steel, because you get this great hardness, great edge retention without it being super, super brittle. Now I'm sure it's pretty hard steel. It's going to be more brittle than some soft, cheap thing that you could just take and bend. But that's the main thing that's the claim to fame of Egomi Super Blue. Great edge retention, great toughness, and great sharpenability, all of which are things that we want in a pocket knife. Now, the only thing we don't want, of course, is it can rust. And so you need to know going in, if you're interested in this blade, it's going to need a little bit of TLC. So make sure you got the time and energy to put a little bit of oil on that blade and make sure that it's not exposed to high moisture environments for a prolonged period of time. That, by the way, includes your pocket. This is summer, and that's going to come into my testing of the grippiness of the handle here in a minute, because I was as sweaty as can be when I was doing some cutting with this. But your pocket, your house is super high humidity at least where I'm from in this time of year. So you got to know that can rust your knife. So make sure you're willing and able to care for this knife if you get it in the Egomi Super Blue. Now, this is a sprint run, so if you're watching this, in 2016, there may not be none left drool over this knife, and use this review to decide whether or not maybe you like whatever sprint run of the stretch is going on at the time, or maybe you just like the regular stretch that comes in VG10. So the blade, oh yeah, I guess I should tell you the rest of the stuff about the blade. It is 3.5 inches long. In addition to the Egomi Super Blue, it's a full flat grind, which I love. It's no wonder Nut & Fancy harps on full flat grind all the time. I have quite a few knives in a number of different blade styles. I really like a lot of different blade styles, okay? I'm not saying, oh man, if it's a hollow grind, it's no good, or if it's only a partial flat grind or partial whatever. They're all good. They all have uses. And I'm going to say, for example, my Buck Vantage is a great cutting knife. Absolutely fantastic. And it's, of course, hollow grind. And it's a great slicer, great cutter. Now, this is also a great slicer. And as are the other knives that I have that are in a full flat grind. It's just a really, really utilitarian blade style. It's sort of one of those blade styles that is a master of all things. It slices well, it chops well. There's not too many weak points, with this exception. Some full flat grind knives, let's say the paramilitary 2 or the military, those points are pretty stinking fine, and you could break it pretty easily. This is not nearly as fine. Now, of course, I would recommend being careful because it's a pretty fine point, but overall, this is a really utilitarian blade shape, maybe even a little more so than the Para 2. It would be a little stronger near the tip. That would be the only edge I would give it. It is a thinner profile as well, so the thinness of the blade is going to be maintained longer. If the Para 2 goes like this knife goes like this. So blade shape is excellent. As for most Spydercos, their draw points, and maybe you could call it a modified draw point or something like that if you wanted to be a stickler about it. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a draw point. So moving toward the handle, of course, it is deployed by Spidey hole, and it's a lockback design, so you're not flipping this thing out the way you would. It's a little slower on deployment than, say, your Para 2, unless. Yeah, see, I can't do it. Maybe with a lot of practice, or maybe there's some of you out there who have just mastered that finger flip and you can just shoot this thing out. That's fine. I am not to that level yet. And I don't really, I'll be honest, I don't practice it a lot because I use my pocket knife by getting it out of my pocket, opening it, cutting what I want to cut, closing it, and putting it away. I'm not really that concerned with how quickly I can flip it out. Although, I have some knives that I can flip quickly, and I enjoy flipping a knife like everybody else. It's just this one doesn't flip very nicely, and it's not designed to, and most lockbacks don't. So, it is deployed via Spidey hole. I love that deployment mechanism. Sal Glesser was a genius when he came up with putting a hole in a blade and using that to deploy the knife. It's so comfortable, so handy. Great idea. Now, I've got to move fast. I'm already at 10 minutes, and I haven't even gotten to the handle yet. And there's actually quite a bit to say about the handle. The pocket clip is positionable to all 4 spots. Of course, it comes right side tip up carry, which is where I want it anyway, so there's no point in moving it. It is torque bit construction. You can see that here, so it'd be easy to take apart and clean up the washers or whatever. Although, as frustrating as this sounds, that will void your warranty from Spyderco, which is super annoying because I'm a big believer in being able to do some maintenance on your knives. Now, the rest of what you need to know about this handle, it's very ergonomic. You've got this half choil here. You've got a great thumb ramp, so you can really grip the knife well. The FRN is exceptional. You know, people talk about, well, G10 is the best thing ever, and I love G10. I have tons of knives in G10. It is fantastic in terms of grippiness. Even, you know, whether you compare the Spyderco and Cold Steel grippiness, whatever you want to do, it's great, no question. However, I use this knife to do a bunch of cutting while it was like, 90 degrees and 90% humidity. I was sweating like crazy. My hands were sweaty and slippery, and I had no problem keeping a hold of it. It worked out very, very well. So I can't offer any complaints in terms of the grippiness of this or lack thereof. I found it very, very good. Now, one other thing about the pocket clip, its retention is almost ideal. I'm kind of a stickler for this. I don't want pocket clips that are too tight. I don't want them too loose. This is ideal. It holds on well. You know, if I did a headstand, it's not going to come out of my pocket. But it's not hard to get out either. So it's just hits that sweet spot where it retains really well and is still nice and easy to get out. It is a lockback design. It's got that little divot cut out of it so that you're less likely to accidentally unlock the knife. You know, how often has that ever happened, right? Has it even happened at all? Other than the guy who, you know, said, well, I must have somehow accidentally pushed it down and cut my finger. Well, yeah, you accidentally pushed it down. It's sort of like the guys who have accidental discharge of firearms. In almost every case, they were doing something dumb, right? So carry on. I'm not going to get off topic too much. I'm not big on a lot of the extra safety features on knives. Like put a lock on it, that's great. That's really useful. But auto locks and this and that and trying to, you know, find every way of keeping somebody from being an idiot, people are always going to be idiots. They're always going to hurt themselves. Now, the overall impressions of this knife. I've done a bunch of cutting with this. I've carried it around in my pocket. You know, it's no wonder that some of the other reviewers call this an ideal everyday carry knife. Does it beat the Para 2? It's not quite as fun to flip out as the Para 2. It doesn't have quite the cool factor, except for this one does because of that really cool Agomi Super Blue blade steel. Now, I'm going to talk about this knife in particular when I talk about overview. If you want to know just about the Spyderco Stretch, it's very light, very comfortable, highly recommended as an everyday carry blade. Now let's get over to the Super Blue. This knife, in addition to being light and easy to carry and really, really useful, has a ton of cool factor, has a ton of collectability because one, it's a sprint run. So if you've got one, there's only a limited number out there. Two, it's in this super high-end steel, so it's going to perform really well. Not only that, you can see the two steels in the blade, which is kind of cool. It gives you something to talk about when you're talking about your knife collection or what you're carrying in your pocket that day, which again adds cool factor to it. It's very comfortable, very useful, it carries easily. There just aren't too many downsides to this knife, with this exception. If you don't like the look of it, right? You know, some people are not going to like Spydercos. They have a very distinctive look. If you want a larger blade, if you want something heavier. Now, the one thing I will say is I would call this a medium use pocket knife or an everyday carry pocket knife. It's not a hard use folder. It's not a gentleman's knife. You know, you don't have to baby it or anything, but it's not going to, you know, I wouldn't go out and try to chop down a tree with this knife. I just don't think it's built for that. Anything short of that, though, I think it's going to work really, really well. I've been a huge fan of this knife. It's just fun to carry, fun to use. This is a big winner as far as I'm concerned. It's no wonder Spyderco has kept it in their lineup for so long. It has been, you know, as one of their production models for, you know, at least 25 years, probably more. If it started in the 80s and it's getting close to the 30 years. So that's pretty cool, I think, too. That's my take on the Spyderco Stretch. in Agomi Super Blue. There's one last look at the knife. There's that really cool blade with the really neat steel. Give you a look at the other side. There's Saul Glesser's Maker's Mark. That's it. Talk to you later.